Hello everyone, and welcome to my Beyond the Gates official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the turbulent and ever-twisting world of Beyond the Gates, where secrets multiply faster than anyone can uncover them, and where every character's smile seems to hide a hurricane, the revelation that Izaiah suddenly decides to marry Eva, seemingly out of nowhere, sparks an avalanche of tension, speculation, and fear, because nothing in this series ever happens without a motive, especially not from a man like Izaiah, whose history is saturated with carefully disguised ambition, long buried grudges, and a chilling ability to manipulate anyone who gets too close. But what makes his hasty marriage plot so gripping and sinister is not merely that he asks Eva to marry him after only a short, suspiciously intense rekindling of affection, but the way every detail surrounding his decision reeks of orchestration, calculation, and an ulterior motive bigger than romance, companionship, or love. Viewers immediately sense that something is deeply wrong, not because Izaiah is incapable of affection, but because he is too capable of strategy, too experienced in pulling psychological levers, too familiar with transforming vulnerability into opportunity, and too practiced in hiding his true intentions behind impeccable charm, that glossy persuasive smile, and the composed demeanor of a man who always looks like he is 3 steps ahead of his enemies, and maybe even 3 steps ahead of his own allies, including Eva, who walks into his plan unaware of how precisely she is being positioned like a key piece on a board Izaiah has been quietly setting for months, perhaps years, and as the season unravels, we begin to see that Izaiah's rapid decision to marry her is not rooted in a spontaneous emotional awakening, but in a dark, methodically engineered plot that intersects with nearly every ongoing conflict in Fairmont Crest, from the shadowy land dispute involving the Crestwood estate, to the missing financial ledgers tied to the Pierce family scandal, to the decades-old feud between the Aguilar dynasty and the Gresham bloodline. Because Eva, though she has long been perceived as a gentle, somewhat isolated presence within the ensemble, happens to carry a piece of information, a family right, or perhaps even a hidden inheritance that would grant Izaiah access to unimaginable leverage if he can secure it through marriage, locking the legal, emotional, and moral boundaries around her life so tightly that she becomes both the key and the cage to everything he wants. And this possibility becomes more terrifying as the narrative shows just how thoroughly Izaiah has woven himself into Eva's emotional vulnerabilities, subtly studying her loneliness, her longing for connection, her fractured relationship with her brother Julian, and the private guilt she carries over the night of the Harborview fire. Guilt that Izaiah knows she will do almost anything to soothe or escape. And he uses this knowledge to create a sense of safety, spinning himself as the only person who truly understands her, the only person who can help her rebuild, the only person who sees her as more than the mistakes she desperately tries to bury, all the while presenting himself as stable, grounded, dependable, and reformed, even though the audience is constantly reminded of the darkness simmering beneath his calm exterior, shown through lingering camera shots, subtle musical dissonance, and moments where his mask cracks just enough for viewers to see the coldness behind his eyes. But the brilliance of the show's writing lies in the fact that Eva does not appear foolish or naive. She is simply human, wounded, and yearning, and Izaiah, like the master strategist he is, knows exactly how to mold his presence to fit the shape of her emotional emptiness, understanding with chilling precision that people rarely question the intentions of those who offer them the comfort they have convinced themselves they do not deserve, and that is what transforms his decision to marry her into an act not of love but of predation. Yet what makes the plot truly sinister is the way it is connected to threads the audience has almost forgotten, like the glimpse of Izaiah receiving that mysterious phone call in Season 2, where a voice distorted by static whispered, "You know what you owe us," or the way he destroyed that envelope with the crimson seal, the same seal that later appears in the files surrounding the secret syndicate operating beneath the facade of legitimate business in Fairmont Crest, a syndicate that Eva's late father allegedly crossed years before his death, leaving behind a debt or promise or secret that now lies dormant inside Eva's legal rights to the land bordering the East Ward, land that Izaiah appears desperate to own or control, and as the wedding plot intensifies, the writers expertly craft a sense of claustrophobia around Eva, isolating her piece by piece from her friends, subtly cutting her communication lines, redirecting her loyalties, and inflating her belief that Izaiah is the only person she can trust, while hinting to viewers through parallel scenes. Like the one where Detective Rowan comments that accidents follow Izaiah like shadows attached with nails, that Eva is walking straight into a trap fashioned with the precision of someone who has spent years honing the art of psychological warfare. Meanwhile, Isaiah's demeanor grows increasingly unsettling, though in ways so restrained that only the audience notices. The too measured smiles, the casual possessive touches, the long silences where he seems to be evaluating Eva instead of loving her, and the disturbing frequency with which he shows up in places he should not know she would be, such as her mother's greenhouse at dawn or the empty chapel where she goes to cry after discovering that her best friend Lila lied to her, leading viewers to suspect that Izaiah has someone surveilling her or that he has hacked into something personal, perhaps her messages or her private journal notes. And even as Eva begins to sense the edges of something wrong, Izaiah moves swiftly with the proposal and wedding planning, pushing everything forward with such intensity that she feels swept up in the momentum, unable to process her unease in time. But the audience is left torn between wanting Eva to escape and wanting to see how far Isaiah's plan goes and what exactly he stands to gain, because the show teases that the marriage is the final step in unlocking something massive, whether it's a deed, a confession, a will, or the last puzzle piece to a conspiracy that stretches far beyond Fairmont Crest, possibly even into the political and financial networks. Glimpsed inside plots involving the senator and the Horizon Trust firm, yet despite how dark Isaiah's intentions appear, the writing leaves enough ambiguous nuance to imply that he may harbor a conflicted emotional attachment to Eva, one that confuses the boundaries of his plan, which makes his character even more unsettling. Because a villain who believes they are capable of love is far more dangerous than a villain who feels nothing at all, and through this lens, Izaiah becomes one of Beyond the Gate's most chilling antagonists, not a loud, violent, impulsive threat but a quiet, patient, eerily methodical architect of emotional entrapment, whose decision to marry Eva is not a romantic gesture but a weapon disguised as devotion, a strategy wrapped in silk and promises, a nightmare wearing the costume of a fairy tale. And as the season barrels toward its climax with the wedding looming and Eva unknowingly approaching the point of no return, viewers brace themselves for the inevitable moment when Isaiah's facade shatters and the true extent of his sinister plot is revealed, promising consequences that will ripple across the entire narrative, altering alliances, igniting feuds, and exposing the darkest corners of Fairmont Crest in a way that will redefine everything the audience believes about love, power, loyalty, and the terrifying truth that the most dangerous monsters in Beyond the Gates are the ones who convince you they're your safe place. The deeper the season dives into Isaiah's sudden marriage plot, the more Beyond the Gates embraces its signature blend of psychological tension, atmospheric foreboding, and character-driven paranoia, expanding Isaiah's motives from personal ambition into a sprawling, multi-layered conspiracy in which Eva becomes not only a tool but also an unknowing catalyst, because as more clues surface, it becomes chillingly clear that Izaiah is not acting alone. His abrupt push for marriage is synchronizing too perfectly with a series of unsettling events rippling across Fairmont Crest. Security footage mysteriously deleted from the municipal archive, 3 witnesses in the Crestwood estate dispute suddenly leaving town, and the sealed court documents concerning the Harborview fire quietly being reopened without any public record of who requested them, each coincidence threading itself to Izaiah like invisible string pulling tight around the narrative, making viewers realize that the marriage is only the surface of a much larger scheme, and as Eva moves closer to the wedding date, the atmosphere around her becomes increasingly distorted, with friends either turning suspiciously distant or becoming overly friendly in ways that feel coordinated, especially Lila's sudden insistence on helping Eva choose wedding venues or Julian's uncharacteristic silence whenever Isaiah's name is mentioned, as if someone has warned them, bribed them, or threaten them into compliance, and all the while Izaiah maintains his calm, controlled presence, appearing at Eva's side with immaculate timing, comforting her at the exact moment she feels abandoned, presenting himself as the one stable constant amid chaos he may very well be orchestrating. But the show also deepens the moral complexity of his character by revealing fragmented glimpses of his past, hints buried in flashbacks, showing a younger Izaiah overhearing his mother begging a man with that same crimson-sealed envelope not to take something from them, implying that Izaiah is repeating an inherited cycle of debt and manipulation, a legacy of desperation that has twisted into the chilling persona viewers see now. And this revelation strengthens the idea that his marriage to Eva is part of a generational plan, perhaps the last step in settling an old score or fulfilling a coerced obligation that has hovered over his family like a specter. And while the audience tries to piece together how Eva fits into this legacy, the tension escalates when Rowan uncovers a hidden clause in the Horizon Trust firm records linking Eva's late father to a clandestine agreement promising a large tract of land and proprietary tech rights to whichever family Eva legally joins through marriage, meaning that Izaiah's proposal is not just emotional manipulation, but a calculated takeover of assets worth millions, possibly enough to buy silence, loyalty, or a clean slate with the syndicate pursuing him. And this discovery becomes even more disturbing when viewers learn that Izaiah has been surveilling Eva long before their relationship rekindled. Subtle hints like the way he knows details she never told him out loud, the way he references memories she shared only in private messages, or how he predicts her reactions with eerie precision, suggesting he has read her therapy notes, accessed her cloud backups, or intercepted communication from Rowan, Julian, or her doctor. And yet the writers cleverly weave ambiguity into his actions, leaving enough emotional sincerity in Izaiah's expressions, particularly in the rare moments when Eva catches him off guard, that viewers can't fully categorize him as a monster, creating a disorienting tension where the audience simultaneously wants Eva to escape and also wants to believe that Izaiah might actually care for her on some warped emotional plane. But the show excels in amplifying Eva's internal conflict as she begins to feel the pressure of an invisible cage closing around her, especially as she experiences subtle but alarming signs, like her car brakes reacting strangely, the porch light in her home flickering at precisely the same intervals every night, or the chilling discovery that someone has rearranged her childhood photographs in her closet, placing Izaiah's picture at the center of the frame as if rewriting her past to merge with his. And although Eva's instincts whisper that something is terribly wrong, she pushes those feelings aside because the emotional momentum around her is too overwhelming, the voices of people she trusts too synchronized in their encouragement, and Izaiah's presence too soothing in the moments when she feels frightened, which is exactly the psychological trap the show wants viewers to see, that Eva is not being naive, but is being expertly manipulated by someone who has studied her trauma patterns well enough to weaponize them. Meanwhile, the supporting plotline intensifies when Rowan secretly investigates Izaiah's link to the syndicate, uncovering a digitally erased identity and a trail of offshore accounts tied to someone using an alias that closely resembles the childhood nickname Eva's father once mentioned in his recordings, implying an old connection between the families that Eva has never been told, a connection that might explain why Izaiah has been entangled with her life long before she ever noticed him, and this possibility casts a shadow of dread over the narrative. Was Eva chosen, targeted, promised, or even raised unknowingly for this outcome? A question that becomes even more chilling when Julian finds an old photograph of Eva's father shaking hands with a much younger Izaiah's mother, both wearing expressions that suggest fear rather than friendship. And as the series pushes toward the apex of the wedding arc, the tension becomes unbearable. Izaiah's behavior grows more controlling in subtle ways, Eva's sense of reality frays, and the audience feels the human weight of a woman slipping deeper into a relationship that has been engineered from the ground up to bind her legally, emotionally, and psychologically to a man whose love is indistinguishable from a trap, causing viewers to hold their breath as every episode edges closer to the moment when either Eva will uncover the truth and attempt to break free, or Izaiah will execute the final phase of his plan, an event the show heavily implies will change the entire hierarchy of power in Fairmont Crest, exposing alliances that were never real, debts that were never repaid, and a sinister underground network that may have chosen evil long before she ever knew she was part of the game. As Beyond the Gates pushes into its next arc, the writing intensifies around the growing sense that Izaiah's plan to marry Eva is not only carefully premeditated but connected to a far greater and far older conspiracy than anyone in Fairmont Crest realizes, because the deeper Rowan, Julian, and even Lila poke into the shadows surrounding Izaiah, the more they begin to notice a disturbing pattern. Every person who has ever questioned Izaiah's motives in the past has faced sudden, inexplicable misfortune. Relationships dissolved overnight, businesses burned down in electrical fires, medical records altered, inheritances rerouted, and one chilling case where a whistleblower's personal history was erased so completely that even their birth certificate vanished from public record. And although these events were once dismissed as coincidences or tragedies, the proximity of each one to a moment when Izaiah needed to clear an obstacle becomes too unsettling to ignore, particularly as Eva edges closer to a marriage that seems designed to lock her into a lifetime of emotional, legal, and financial entanglement before she ever discovers the truth. And while converge, as Shanice stands over her best friend's fragile body, knowing that the person responsible is bound to her by blood, and the camera lingers on Shanice's trembling hands as she tries to reconcile her two realities, the world where her mother tucked her in with quiet tenderness, and the world where that same mother sanctioned a biochemical experiment that nearly killed the one person who stood by Shanice through every storm. And the writers deepen this emotional chaos by revealing that Haley's poisoning was not merely a data-gathering test, but part of a larger system-wide failsafe, a contingency plan built into the Gates initiative that requires a human variable to determine how the toxin would disperse under real-world conditions, meaning her suffering was not accidental but fundamental to the syndicate strategy. And when Shanice discovers this, her grief evolves into a devastating clarity, a bitter recognition that the only way forward is to tear down the very foundation of her mother's empire. But Beyond the Gates complicates this decision by showing the consequences. If the syndicate collapses, the geopolitical balance of the region could fall into chaos. Water rights could become even more unregulated, and extremist factions waiting in the shadows might seize the opportunity to impose their own brutal ideologies. And Shanice, for perhaps the first time in her life, understands the scale of the war she's been thrust into, yet she refuses to let that absolve her mother, because the truth, no matter how large, does not erase the devastation inflicted on Haley. And the series leans heavily into this philosophical clash as mother and daughter face off in emotionally nuclear confrontations thick with unresolved trauma, quiet desperation, and the suffocating sense that both women are trapped in roles they didn't choose, but inherited from the world's failures. And in these scenes, the cinematography takes on an almost operatic weight, dimly lit hallways, flickering overhead lights, conversations whispered in underground bunkers, the echo of footsteps in abandoned filtration stations, and each visual choice reinforces the show's central idea that corruption thrives in darkness, and the only way to end it is by dragging every shadowed truth into the unforgiving brightness of accountability. But even as Shanice prepares to expose everything, the writers introduce a twist that deepens the emotional labyrinth, the revelation that her mother wasn't acting alone, that she was following orders from a council so deeply embedded in international water policy that unmasking them could lead to global panic. And this council, known only as the Subterraneans, anticipated her downfall and planted failsafes to ensure that if she were compromised, catastrophic water outages would ripple across every major city tied to their network, effectively forcing Shanice to choose between saving millions or ending her mother's reign. And the sheer weight of this ultimatum sends Shanice spiraling into a moral crisis unlike anything we've seen from her, a crisis where every decision is a trap and every path leads to devastation. And while all of this unfolds, Haley, still pale, still weak, still fighting for every breath, begins to piece together fragmented memories from the night of her poisoning, memories that include seeing someone at her door who she thought was a hallucination, Someone wearing the exact perfume Shanice's mother always wore. And this discovery sends a tremor through the storyline. Not only did Shanice's mother sanction the poisoning, she may have personally supervised it, and the emotional violence of this possibility, this intimate betrayal, ignites a firestorm in Shanice that cannot be contained, a determination to seek truth so complete that it pushes her to infiltrate the very heart of the syndicate's operations, leading to a breathtaking infiltration sequence that ranks among the best in contemporary American television, full of narrow escapes, cryptic data vaults, coded files marked gatekeeper, and a final scene where Shanice discovers a hidden recording her mother made years ago, a message addressed to Shanice specifically, revealing that she always knew this confrontation would come, that she raised Shanice to be strong enough to stop her if the world ever needed saving from her own decisions. A revelation that reframes her mother's entire persona from cold villain to tragic self-aware antagonist who sacrificed her humanity long before she sacrificed anyone else. And with this recording echoing in her ears, Shanice realizes that her mother's ultimate plan was not domination but succession, that she intended for Shanice herself to inherit the syndicate, reshape it, cleanse it, and lead it into a new future. A proposition so horrifying and yet so emotionally loaded that Shanice can barely breathe under the weight of it, and as the camera pulls back from her tear-streaked face, the audience is left breathless, suspended in the unbearable tension of a daughter torn between destroying the monster her mother became and honoring the broken woman who believed she was protecting the world in the only way she knew how. And this is the emotional and narrative brilliance of Beyond the Gates. It refuses to offer clean answers, refuses to reduce its characters to archetypes, instead immersing viewers in the messy, agonizing reality that sometimes the people we love most can become the architects of our greatest nightmares, and even then, even in the depths of betrayal, we are still tethered to them by threads of memory, longing, and unfinished love that neither truth nor tragedy can fully sever. What makes this next chapter of Beyond the Gates even more unnerving is how the writers plunge the audience deeper into the psychological fault lines forming beneath Shanice's every step, because the moment she discovers that her mother intended her to inherit the syndicate, a throne carved from secrets, fear, and hidden power, the narrative shifts from simply exposing